I'm Randy Barbado, and this is Fenton Bailey, and we're co-producers, co-directors of Robert Mapplethorpe. Look at the pictures.
Which is a feature documentary about the life and work of Robert Mapplethorpe. And what's unique about it is that we tell his story through his own words. And we look at his pictures, and he tells us what he was about, what he intended to do, and how he succeeded in doing it.
Take your shirt off. Sounds silly, I guess, using the word magic. Unfold your arms. Stay right there. Lift your head up a little bit. I was able to pick up the magic of the moment and work with it. That's my rush in doing photography.
Kenny, hold that. Hold that.
Tilt a little right and turn a little right.
Turn your head to the right. Now bring your eyes back to me.
Look back here.
Lean right, turn right.
Put your head down. Now bring your eyes up.
Click, 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 click. Eyes to me. Click. Chin up.
Turn this way.
Turn your head this way. Yeah, more. And instead of looking to the side, look straight out. Often I'm dealing with fractions of inches. Yeah, you can even, no, turn, from the neck, stay there. I'm looking for that perfect position where the head sort of somehow makes sense to me.
Why Mapplethorpe and why now?
Well, shortly after Mapplethorpe died, Jesse Helms completely hijacked the artist and his work for his own ends, and his catchphrase was, "Look at the pictures." But now 25 years has passed, and we can really look at the pictures free of that constructed controversy and that agenda. We can look at the pictures, hopefully, as the artist intended.
Do you want to say something too, or?
What? I thought that was perfect.
That was.
Catherine might want to answer.
I'll give you another.
Yeah.
Why now? Also, why now? Because
Why now? Sorry.
Why now?
Why now? Because this is a time, New York, pre-internet, pre-gentrification, pre-AIDS, and I think we can finally see that so much of our culture today began then. This was the sort of ground zero of that time, and I think people are really interested in that recent history.
I
think also the obviously the joint retrospective that has been planned between LACMA and the Getty sort of gave impetus to the film. That exhibition has been in the planning for 5 years, and I think it's really to examine the first modern new artist who used photography as a medium rather than being a photographer, and somebody who really paved the way also for the individual artist who strives not as a school or a group to exist, but also as a businessman, the big ego, the big name, and he really was the one who sort of paved the path for a lot of artists today. And I think the photos, if you look at them now, look unbelievably fresh. I think they look unbelievably new, and I think they still make eyes roll and are still there to shock. And it's going to be very interesting because I think they stand the test of time. And for me, that is the true genius, the true artist.
The timelessness.
The ones who stand the test of time.
And also, you ask why now, and I'll have to say because this is when Robert would have wanted it. And I think we can all attest that somehow things just sort of, since the day I've known Robert, things just sort of happen in a very sort of timely manner and appropriate time. I mean, the fact that the Cincinnati controversy and the NRA happened just after he passed away was sort of appropriate for the perpetuation of his name and the building of that legacy. And I think Robert's spirit is very much alive, and I think he would have wanted it to be now. So
you already hinted at my next question, because you make quite an interesting statement with the film and concerning the structure. It's enveloped in in political statements, the beginning and the end, and it really shows that you can't exclude art from politics. It somehow always goes together. What can you say?
Well,
about that? Why did you choose to structure it from that?
part of the reason Mapplethorpe's name became sort of legendary is because, as Fenton said, it was sort of hijacked by Jesse Helms. And for us making the film, it was important to kind of address that right out of the gate. But what we did is we took what Jesse Helms said, look at the pictures, sort of kind of expecting people to be outraged. But we felt now you can tell people to look at the pictures and have the sort of the opposite effect. I think that the politics of his work sort of made the name legendary, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I've lost my train of thought.
But maybe let's stay with politics a little bit, because it's so interesting. He opened such an amazing way. But now, looking at American politics right now, we're all so shocked in Europe what's happening at this very moment. So is there like a backlash happening, or what is the situation?
I think artists generally record the history of our time, and when we are all gone, the art is what stays. And I think it's very interesting right now that his pictures and the time and the path he paved was much more modern than what is going on now. And I think since 9/11 there is a backlash. Absolutely.
So how can Mapplethorpe help us understand times and use it maybe more wisely right now?
The pictures.
Look at the pictures. What do they show? What do they express? What do they symbolize? What can we learn?
Well, I think art is always about expanding your mind. It's always about and when it comes to politics, politics is about sort of, when politics works, it's about non-judgment. It's about having an open mind. It's about being able to sort of expand the way we look at the world. That's what Mapplethorpe was all about. Mapplethorpe was his work was about that. His life was about that. He, people wanted to judge him, but the reality was he not only produced beautiful art, but he led an incredibly honest life. So what we can take from him is we all have an expectation that, this outrageous, ambitious monster. No, it's the opposite. Someone who was leading an incredibly admirable, honest life, producing beautiful work. That's beyond political. That's what, weirdly, and that's the irony. And you look at the pictures and it's the complete opposite. But what I think what we can take is sort of, we can all learn a lot of lessons from him, I think.
And Robert would be he would be humorous about this. He'd be laughing about
it. The current situation?
Well, politics was the least.
Right.
He was so non-political.
Yes.
So the fact that all these political issues have been raised and are still being discussed, and about pictures that he did in the late 70s I started working with him in the early 80s, and he was well beyond, and that was his past, and the fact that we're still talking about it and it's being a political issue and raising all of this discussion is interesting, to say the least.
But there's nothing, and I don't want to get all Oprah, but there's nothing more political than
Oprah with a penis. That's what I always say. That's what I want to be.
But there's nothing more political than leading an authentic life, and that's what he did. And he was a documentarian as much as he was an artist, and at a time when it wasn't like cool or hip to be gay, or cool or hip to be sort of promoting it. So I think all of that was political, and he is political, even though he wasn't totally the opposite.
Well, I think he realized what we say Jesse Helms hijacked his work. I think stepping back, you can see that Mapplethorpe actually figured out what a great way to get really noticed would be to throw the cat among the pigeons. I think he used the political process for his own ends. I think he's very smart. So I think he kind of hijacked Helms.
Yeah, let's talk about him a little more. How does a boy who comes from a regular American white middle class sort of like background, how does he manage to enter into this world? What is his path? What are his skills? What are his talents?
Everybody is born with some sort of destiny and some sort of talent and some sort of interest, and I think early on, Robert realized that he had a creative spirit, and he was sort of an outcast and a little bit of an awkward child that other kids didn't play with quite the same as my older brother, Richard, who was 2 years older than him. And I think he realized pretty quickly that there was a world outside this little middle-class enclave in Queens, and was smart and got out of high school very young and went to Pratt, and that was the beginning of where he started to discover himself and discover and channel his energy into the artwork and start developing the persona of Robert Mapplethorpe that we all are talking about today. You know, his sexuality was still something that I think was something to explore, and you know, even the days when I remember him coming back and visiting with Patti Smith, and them telling my parents and the rest of my family that they were married. I mean, I grew up for a number of years thinking that Robert and Patti were married, and I have personal cards written by Patti in her hand to dear mom and dad, and talking about their life together as a couple, and they, you know, they were very much a couple, and as much as a married couple could be, but you know, they just weren't married. But you know, it was during that period I think he just started discovering his real sexuality, and even to the surprise of Patti, you know. So how it happens is how it happens to all of us. We just sort of start discovering our true selves, and hopefully being true to that. And I mean, it's unfortunate some people still, I guess, stay in the closet and, you know, still suppress. But thankfully, Robert, even though he came from a family that certainly wouldn't have encouraged that sort of lifestyle, he had the wherewithal. He chose to be himself, and that's very, very commendable. And I'm proud of that. Yeah.
Let's talk about the structure of the film again and your intention when you started working on it. What did you want to show of his personality, or what was the intention really? Because there's a lot of stuff published about him already.
That's right. I mean, there is a lot of stuff published about him, and a lot of people have told his story. What was interesting to us was how his presence, since his death, his presence has really only grown. But our real understanding of him actually kind of hasn't really grown. And for many, many people, it's still that scandalous artist, that gay artist who died of AIDS. So our approach was, one, let's look at the pictures. But then two, could we tell his story in his own words? And a lot of people said, oh, Robert couldn't talk about his work, Robert didn't talk very much. But we found that actually he sought out friends and people who were writers, and he wanted them to write about him, and he talked to them. And so we came across a whole trove of Robert talking about himself, his work, his intentions. So he's really the narrator of the film, and that's what this film is really. It is his story in his words, looking at his pictures. And in some ways it's very simple.
I also feel like we sort of followed breadcrumbs that Robert left for us, because he did seem to have a number of relationships with people, with writers who could help tell the story. So really, like Fenton was saying, first we looked at the pictures, then we tried to dig up his voice as much as possible, and then we sort of followed the breadcrumbs of as many of the relationships that we could dig up that he had, and many of them were, you know, the sort of various collaborators that he had during his life. And then really at the end of the day, the anchor was Edward, because Edward was able for us to kind of bridge the gap between so many of aspects of Robert's life and sort of remind everyone of the humanity and the heart that he had, you know, of the heart of it.
Do you think the dark side took over in the end?
No, I don't think it's about the dark side versus the light side. What it's about, I think, for Robert was duality. I think he was fascinated by the light and fascinated by the dark and the tension between them. And he's a very singular artist, but everything about his life and his work is about duality. I mean, even Edward, you know, you're his brother, and you have that duality. And Edward worked so long and so hard with Robert and collaborated with Robert. And Robert was this serial collaborator, you know, a singular artist, but someone who definitely succeeded in doing what he wanted to do through collaborations with other people.
How were the reactions so far? I know that you were at Sundance, I think.
Universal acclaim.
How did the people react?
you
You
know,
know, I still
people
feel people love him, but he also can be a controversial artist to some. People say like, what did people, you know?
Well, I mean, the
say?
pictures I think are still shocking to some, but I think Randy and
Beautiful
Fenton
shots,
succeed. Well, there is a sort of tension that raises it beyond pornography because of the lighting, because of the positioning, because of the framing. So you're torn because even something that might look as if it could possibly be very painful or difficult to look at is elevated by the beauty of the shot. So I think the reactions have been extremely positive. I think people were very moved. I think Edward moved everyone to tears. I think the music carries the film beautifully, and I think the artistry of Randy and Fenton, they really managed to create a very tense and tight portrait. There are no
Totally agree with that. Yes,
but it's really true. It's very moving, and you somehow there are no complex. There are no length in the film. You know, there's a very good tension, and it's very entertaining.
And
Also
of course, it
very
was directed
funny.
by
It's
two
not just,
people.
you know,
It's that duality
so
thing.
it's the duality.
Again, it comes back.
Yeah.
but
And
I
it
think
has a lot of humor and a lot of warmth.
I think people are surprised by the film because I think, again, like I think people know the name and have an expectation, and then I don't think even his artwork, like people we didn't really know. We knew his art. We thought we knew his art,
Right.
but
You always think
oh
you
my
know.
God, it's so vast and so incredible and impressive, and that he was this artist. He was a young artist. He was a kid who knew he was an artist when he was a kid. And looking at that early work, a lot of which I really love, was just so surprising. And so being able to finally help people see the breadth of his work was satisfying. And I do think for a lot of people that was surprising. And then also just getting to know him, I think, was satisfying for a lot of people.
And I think the perception has always been filtered through the eyes of a Patti Smith or through the eyes of a Sam Wagstaff and his biographers. And I think what really was very successful here, that you get an unfiltered view. You know, he's really telling his story. He will tell you how important those relationships were, and there were many other relationships that were just as important, you know. So.
What does he? Obviously, we are living in kind of like quite difficult times, especially for emerging artists these days. What does he teach to young, emerging, creative people, artists? What is his legacy in terms of a father figure, a role model, however you want to label it?
That you have to be your authentic self. Absolutely. And that in addition to producing the best work you can, you have to work really hard to make sure people get to look at it or notice it. That it isn't enough just to sit in your room creating a masterpiece. You then got to go out and hustle and work hard. And I think that's such a, hopefully, an inspirational thing for people watching the film who are artists, because Robert just said, this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to work really hard at it.
Can New York still offer them these days?
Maybe Berlin.
I don't know. I don't think so. But
No, I think the lesson for young artists is, and I see that all the time with young visual artists, that they look too much at the market.
Okay.
And they
Can't
try
ignore it, though.
they try to please. They try to sort out what galleries they would like to be represented with, and those are the artists that will never succeed. Because at the end of the day, you have to be fearless, and you have to bring something new to the table. And that only you can bring to the table, your own individuality and yourself.
Something interesting about just the art scene is that, like, kind of the art scene is moving to the West Coast. like LA has a really hot art scene and young, because you can afford to live in LA. You can, like the east side of LA, you can, downtown, there are affordable lofts. So it's just kind of
time is different in LA.
Yeah, and I just think it's ironic that also Mapplethorpe's legacy lives on in Los Angeles at the Getty and the LACMA. So it's like really, it's a little creepy almost. It's the way it's played out.
Okay. I had some reservations about that when the foundation decided to make the donation to the Getty. But then one of the comforting aspects was that Sam Wagstaff's collection was there. So it sort of made sense, because Robert was such a quintessential New Yorker, a New York artist, that I was always sort of like, well, the archives should really stay here. And, you know, there's a gallery at the Guggenheim Museum named after Robert, and so I was considering maybe that. But, you know, I think the enthusiasm that the Getty is showing and the enthusiasm that the Los Angeles County Museum is showing by doing this joint venture, which is historical, they've never done anything like that, is comforting, and it makes me happy that the archives are there and Los Angeles is going to benefit from that.
Great, thank you so much. Those
you.
are the best closing words, I think. Thank you so much.
Makes sense to me.
Why Mapplethorpe and why now?
Well, you know, shortly after Mapplethorpe died, Jesse Helms completely hijacked the artist and his work for his own ends, and his catchphrase was, "Look at the pictures." But now 25 years has passed, and we can really look at the pictures free of that constructed controversy and that agenda. We can look at the pictures, hopefully, as he intended to do, and how he succeeded in doing it.
Take your shirt off. Sounds silly, I guess, you know, using the word magic. Unfold your arms. Stay right there. Lift your head up a little bit. I was able to pick up the magic of the moment and work with it. You know, that's my rush in doing photography.
Kenny, hold that. Hold that.
Tilt a little right and turn a little right.
Turn your head to the right. Now bring your eyes back to me.
Look back here.
Lean right, turn right.
Put your head down. Now bring your eyes up.
Click, 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 click. Eyes to me. Click. Chin up.
Turn this way.
Turn your head this way. Yeah, more. And instead of looking to the side, look straight out. Often I'm dealing with fractions of inches. Yeah, you can even, no, turn, just, yeah, from the neck, stay there. I'm looking for that perfect position where the head sort of somehow.
I'm Randy Barbado, and this is Fenton Bailey, and we're co-producers, co-directors of Robert Mapplethorpe. Look at the pictures.
Which is a feature documentary about the life and work of Robert Mapplethorpe. And what's unique about it is that we tell his story through his own words. And we look at his pictures, and he tells us what he was about, what the artist intended.
Do you want to say something too, or?
I thought that was perfect.
That was
That's you might want to answer.
Well, I'll give you another. Yeah. Why now? Also, why now? Because, you know.
Why now?
Sorry.
Why now?
Why now? Because this is a time, New York, pre-internet, pre-gentrification, pre-AIDS. And I think we can finally see that so much of our culture